mom, Zoe's Nana, Gabe's Nana, of blessed memory, had a magic trick. She would make people cry. And laugh, but mostly cry. Not by causing anyone physical pain, God forbid, or by informing people of sad, grievous news. No, my mom elicited the good kind of tears, the crying that takes you by surprise, brought on by something tender and powerful we have seen, heard, felt, or experienced. The type of crying that makes you feel more alive while it's happening and cathartically better when it's over. In the Torah, this type of crying is referred to as nichmar rachamim, translated as the heating up of emotions. We would be at a restaurant. I'd look up from the menu, and my mom is listening or talking sympathetically to the server, nodding her head with great sincerity, something that as a psychologist she had great practice doing. The head nodding is accompanied by her placing an empathic touch on this person's arm. And sure as anything, that server is weeping freely. This kind of scene was repeated often with hotel clerks, fellow customers at the shoe store, and strangers at the airport gate. And Amy reminded me, even her hospice nurse and her oncologist, she was able to step out of her own situation to listen to their troubles and make them cry. It was something about the tone of her voice, the disarming questions she would ask, and her obvious and easy compassion. As my mom joined us at CRC for either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur services every year for 20 seasons, I have a feeling she made some of you cry out there as well. She didn't make me cry like that all that much, probably because I resisted it, given the complexities of parent-child dynamics. I did, however, still get addicted to the tears of heated up emotions. The earliest I can remember this feeling was my first summer at overnight camp when I was 10 years old. It hit me all at once on the very last night. The woods, lake, campers, counselors, and songs that had become my home for 8 weeks, and I cried myself to sleep. I was a little embarrassed and somewhat confused, but my tears felt life-affirming and special. I spent 20 more full summers as a camper and staff member, and though I enjoyed everything leading up to it, my deep, dark secret was that I always looked forward most of all to the ending, just so I could feel those tears again. Through them, I knew with certainty that something utterly significant had just happened. As the years went on, I also took a kind of an affirming pleasure every time I noticed other campers and counselors crying at summer's end. Eventually, I became one of the people who helped draw out those tears. Right, Torah? Ritually singing Leaving on a Jet Plane. I know that Stacy is watching with us on stream, so she loves John Denver. But I would sing it to the entire camp community the night before everyone departed. Now, I know this song is a bit of a sentimental, cheap trick, but it's really effective. Imagine the social impact of 300 boys and men crying it out together. Changes the world. Years later, as a dad, I was privileged to be simply a fly on the wall at the camp's last night ceremony. There, another guitar-wielding counselor sang Jet Plane, and I watched my son Gabe and his camp buddies huddled together, all in tears. From generation to generation, I thought, while I sobbed, of course. Though my camp career is long over, I can still be fairly easily brought to sweet tears, often over having something to do with my own kids. I admit that here at CRC, crying on the job is not an irregular occurrence. Sometimes I'm up here on this bima during an especially sweet moment at a bar or bat mitzvah, and I see Zoe or Gabe whispering to Amy, and I know they are saying to her, teasing me, "Look, Dad is crying again." In fact, the Torah stories that speak most powerfully to me are those that depict this sensation of getting choked up and releasing redemptive tears. They serve as ancient proof that I am simply part of a long line of saps. The warring brothers Jacob and Esau encounter one another after years apart, and to their surprise, the reunion turns into reconciliation, and they sob out their relief and forgiveness. They fall onto one another's necks, a Torah idiom, I think, for a bear hug. Similar scenes take place a generation later in the long saga of Joseph and his brothers. The commentators count Joseph being overtaken by emotional tears 7 times, a Jewishly significant number. During the jagged journey he traveled with his siblings, from jealousy and cruelty to forgiveness and weepy embrace. Very much to my surprise, a few years ago, these very stories played out in my own life as my estranged younger brother and I made peace with one another. We hugged it out and cried while we stayed up all night, getting to know and like one another again. This touching reunion took place, as it turned out, 1 week before my brother Stephen sadly passed away from colon cancer. Crying can play an integral part on Yom Kippur as well. On this day of days, we purposely weaken our physicality to strengthen our spirituality. We aim to break down our defenses and egos and strip away layer after layer of rationalization, hoping to reach a wellspring of vulnerability and honesty. We symbolically circumcise our hearts to become softer and more open, heating up our emotions sometimes powerfully enough to bring forth those meaning-filled tears. Crying on this day can come from hearing the singular melodies, such as Kol Nidre. We may be moved to weep from our memories, sweet and bitter, that are provoked by the familiarity of these gatherings. We can cry from the recognition of how far we need to travel to get from where we are spiritually and ethically to where we know we ought to be. We tear up as we confess our misdeeds, take responsibility for our part in the sins of the world, and resolve to do and be better. Our sobs are due to all the brokenness and cruelty in the world, but also from the sheer beauty and blessings all around us. By the end of this long Yom, this day that seems to stretch on forever, I often drop hopeful and cleansing tears due to the promise that beginnings like a new year can elicit. When we sing that final "May it be a good year," I can truly believe that change and renewal are possible. Perhaps better times can be ahead for us, for those we love, and for everyone, everywhere. Into this charged atmosphere comes a passage from the Talmud that describes yet another holy day gate, the gate of tears. Our tradition holds that this gate is kept open because when someone prays with eyes of tears, those prayers always reach their destination. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel posited divine pathos, the idea that our emotions are moving to an immanent God who actually has feelings, so that when Yom Kippur makes us cry, the very heart of the world grows more sensitive, more vulnerable, and more open to transformation. Our tears, the Zohar teaches, break through the doors of heaven. I personally do not draw distinctions between holy religious experiences and powerful secular ones. I am regularly moved to spiritual tears, for example, through contemporary artistic expressions, especially those that portray the changes that occur in individuals, families, and societies through the sweep of time. Novels such as Jonathan Letham's Fortress of Solitude and Alice Walker's Color Purple, movies like Boyhood, and Broadway shows including Rent and Spring Awakening. But it is music that stirs my emotions like little else, especially performed live and when the artist or band is attempting to do more than entertain, and their desire to connect to and uplift their audiences creates transcendence. For me, there is no artist in any medium whose work touches me as deeply, makes me breathe more easily, move more freely, and turns on my emotional waterworks than Bruce Springsteen. It is some mystic combination of his song structure, tone of his voice, lyrical subject matter, longevity, energy, joy, poignancy, activism, and storytelling. Most of all, I think it's his passionate desire that his performance be liberating, redemptive, and transformative, and he almost always hits that mark. I cried the first time I saw Springsteen in 1980 as a teenager, tears of awe and revelatory joy. 40 years later, there's that 40 again, that experience was bookended for me in a way as I watched him live on my television with, I think, many of you, singing eerily alone because of the COVID lockdown in the nighttime cold of the Lincoln Memorial. It was the virtual celebration of President Biden's inauguration, and the fact that the event was taking place in the menacing shadow of the January 6th attempted insurrection meant that this time my Springsteen cry session produced tears of relief and gratitude. More than anything else, those two events, 40 years apart, helped turn my fantasy of taking some of my rabbinic sabbatical time to follow a bit of a Bruce Springsteen tour into reality. I knew I needed to chase more of those purifying tears. They are such good medicine for my soul, and therefore for my work and for my personal life as well. So I spent a week last February on an epic road trip, attending to the opening 4 concerts on Bruce Springsteen's first tour since the return of performances, and the entire adventure was truly everything I had hoped for and more. And then my mom got her diagnosis, and I dropped everything to drive straight north to be at her first oncology appointment. Somewhere at the end of that drive, tired and filled with concern, I was listening to a recording of a recent Springsteen concert. Bruce was introducing a song called Independence Day by telling a story about one of his legendary adolescent fights with his father. I flashed back to that first time I saw him in concert, when I was much younger, suddenly remembering that the same song was also introduced back then with a narration of that iconic Springsteen father-son blow-up. In 1980, Springsteen's voice was defiant, rebellious, finger-pointing, mocking, and he was all born to run away from his dad. What I heard on the road to Chicago, however, suspended from place and time, was a very different version of that memory. This time, Springsteen, who turned 74 yesterday, spoke from a wide-angle perspective with great empathy for his father, who he now knew was battling depression at the time of that fight. Springsteen had come to terms with the fact that he shared responsibility for the deterioration of his relationship with his father. All of this was shared with the subtext that the storyteller himself was by now a dad as well. This juxtaposition brought on more than weeping. I bawled to the point that I had to pull my car over to the side of the road. It was pouring rain, of course, you can make your own metaphors. What emerged from this intense episode was a tear-stained revelation. I reflected on the passage of time, the ways in which I still very much resembled my youthful self, and the ways in which that boy and I are nearly unrecognizable to each other now. How for all this time in between the 16-year-old me at the Uptown Theater in Chicago and me as a 60-year-old rabbi following the tour, there had been this artist I have never really met, but is someone who is able to articulate, reflect, frame, grieve, celebrate, and grow on this journey for and with me. A line from one of Springsteen's songs had been nagging at me on and off while I traveled, driving all night chasing some mirage. It was too close for comfort for me not to wonder, is that what I'm doing? Chasing mirages? However, following my clarifying roadside meltdown, I knew what had transpired on my unorthodox rabbinic mini sabbatical was real. It was a Yom Kippur Katan, an actual Jewish term for a smaller atonement at one moment that may not happen on this high holy day, but one filled with grace, teshuvah, and renewal nonetheless. After the tears dried, It was as if I had new eyes, just in time to be radically present for my mom and for my family. I am certainly no Bruce Springsteen, and I'll never be able to fully replicate my mom's amazing magic trick. But once in a while, I too can help people release those healing tears. It happens these days mostly when I sing this next prayer. And I am humbled when I look out into this beautiful, wonderful congregation and see emotions heating up, knowing that this mashup version of Hashkivenu and I are simply a pipeline, transmitting spirit to whoever is receptive in the moment. Just a few months ago, we had a religious studies major here observing a Friday night service. He was observing it, he wasn't observing it. There's a difference. Though he had never been in a Jewish space before, he decided spontaneously to stand up to recite Kaddish. Through his weeping, this young man told us he was remembering his brother, who had passed a few years back, and hearing U2's "Take This Soul and Let It Sing" verse used in prayer enabled him to feel his brother's presence. I certainly have special memories of singing Hashkivenu on these high holidays and spotting Michael Steinbaum of blessed memory, his eyes moist and hope-filled, and watching the Polinsky family huddle together having a cleansing cry. I know they're not alone. Actually, I haven't really teared up much since my mom's Shiva, so let's hope her spirit is here right now, helping coax it out for all of us. It's Yom Kippur. The gate of tears is wide open. Let's go through together. What page is it? 107. Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Ain't a boy, mister, I'm a man, and I believe in the promised land. I believe in the faith you gave me. I believe in the love that can save me. Big wheels roll through fields where sunlight streams. Meet me in the land of hope and dreams. Have a little faith, there's magic in the night. It ain't no sin to be glad you're alive. Have a little faith, there's magic in the night. It ain't no sin to be glad you're alive. Tonight we're gonna ride to the sea, wash away these sins from our hands. I ain't a boy, mister, I'm a man. I believe in the promised land. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be Ufrosalenu Sukkot, Sukkot Shlomecha, Ufrosalenu Sukkot Shlomecha, and cover over us tonight with a Sukkot Shalom, a shelter of peace for you, for those you love, a shelter of peace tonight for all creation, for everyone and everything that dwells on earth. Through those redemptive tears, let this night be filled with peace. Thank you, Mom.